I see. I regret my failure to see through the former king's misdeeds.
Where will the kingdom go from here? How will it function in the absence of its king?
I will take up the mantle of governance for the time being, though that is no lasting solution. Ancheim will have to change. With luck, it will become a land led by its people for the benefit of all. What is certain is that it will ever be a welcome home to you and your companions, Lady Vestal. We will pray for your safe journey. Go, and bring your light to all the world.
Ah, good day. I believe this is our first meeting, yes? I am the chairman of the Chaugmar and Profiteur merchantry.
Which is a front. You are a Rutus Profiteur, merchant of death. We see right through you.
Where does this come from? You are a strange girl.
You have conspired with the Time Mage Chaugmar, King of Ancheim, to monopolize the well here.
And you hired desert thieves to attack those who went to the oasis for water.
You have no evidence of this!
We have proof. A note containing instructions to the thieves, and another mentioning a hidden passage to the palace.
Impossible! What is going on? Why would this fall into your hands? You must have skulked into the place of work. You dastardly fiends. Fine, you have unmasked me, but this changes nothing. I will never let you leave here alive!
Accept your fate!
That is all you need. It buys status, fame, anything.
He seemed even nastier than before, don't you think?
It's not like he was doing anything differently, though.
I felt it. His words grated more than in the previous world.
I feel more relieved we have beaten him too.
Your Highness, do you know of a young man named Egil?
Egil? Let me think. No, I cannot say that I have heard of him.
You gave him the badge of a young soldier.
Ah, the young soldier's badge. That takes me back. How do you know of this badge, Tiz?
Well, you see...
That badge was made especially for Owen here. When he was a young man, he was determined to become a soldier of this realm.
It is embarrassing to think of now.
Since then, Owen is the only one to whom I have bequeathed the badge.
I see.
on earth could that ship be doing? Oh, pardon me.
Did you see something?
Yes. A strange ship has been appearing in this harbor ever since the start of the war. It's a decrepit old sailing ship, and it always shows up on foggy nights.
Has it tried to harm you?
No, it's just an eerie sight, though you can hear screams coming from it.
That's the ship. It's still prowling around.
Where did this fog come from?
It's heading for us!
What do we do? There's nobody on board.
An actual, real-life ghost ship?
Aha! Guess that yet breathe? A rare honor.
Have you found what you were looking for?
What do you know of this? So you can read the hearts of men, Windvestal. Amazing. You have a second sight. Welcome to our pirate ship, the SS Funky Francisca. I am Captain Barbarossa, leader of the Black Blade's naval force. You must be the Windvestal and her companion. A pleasure to meet you. I am a ranking member of the Black Blade. Of course I'm kept abreast of your comings and goings, Vestal. You have made quite a name for yourselves, in fact. Were you not aware? I have looked forward to meeting you in battle one day. I leave the helm to you, me matey. We'll make this a fair fight. Yarr! Yarr! The ship is coming apart! How clumsy of me to step through the deck. I sail this ship in search of a certain something, prized by the commander and myself. You might call it adventure. Surely you don't have to be a man of the sea to know that.
I know what you speak of. A man's soul craves nothing more than the romance of adventure.
Well, aren't you two getting on famously, ring a bell?
Perhaps it is something women and children can never understand. If you think about it rationally, it does seem absurd. But absurd or not, it is adventure I seek. And the years I have spent wandering the seas in folly have shown me many truths.
That's it! The truth!
Now, let us have a little fun. See how you fare against my great axe! eyes have bested me, Windvesta. Such power. Forgive me, Suleiman. Commander, it seems my time is up.
What can I help you with?
Oh, look! The wind vessel and her merry band have graced us with their presence!
We haven't come to hear you sing, if that's what you think.
Oh, please! I'm sure you heard rumors of my voice and couldn't help but come to see for yourself. Because we all know when I sing...
We go wild!
Shut it! You won't get your way so easily. I'm afraid it's futile. My personal guard would gladly die for me. Isn't that right, darling?
We're here for you, Praline!
Thank you all! Let's sing a little tune then! Love in the Crossfire! Very nice, I get you tonight. Love in the Crossfire, ready,
Not so fast.
Come on, shield bearer! Love in the Crossfire, ready, fire! What are you doing? This isn't on the set list! Nobody can hear my song now! I'll just have to sing louder. Oh, this isn't working! Time to blow you sky high! How's that? No way! It's useless! Why are you being so mean? You're supposed to worship the ground I walk on! Kick the wind vessel and that other riffraff out of here!
It's over!
No, Praline! Don't leave us!
I'm so sorry, everyone.
The plan went off without a hitch. You drowned her out completely. We should suffer much less attrition on the Eisen Bridge from now on. You've done us a great service.
building you can see in the middle of town, the commander's residence. Mrs. Goodman has been informed of your arrival, Vestal.
Welcome to our humble abode, Vestal. We are honored to receive you and your companions. I am Commander Goodman's wife. Please call me Eleanor. My husband has told me to receive you and your companions as guests of state, Vestal. Please make yourselves at home. Unfortunately, in a time of war, the hospitality I can provide is limited.
Oh, there's no need to go to any trouble for us.
Curses! After all the glory I brought them, he packed me off to the boondocks to patch up wounded soldiers. All's fair in war, I say. Victory must be achieved at all costs. That is what war is all about.
Right you are.
Show respect for the enemy. The goal is not simply to kill. Bah! He's far too old to spout such childish nonsense. Pride and honor are merely shackles on the battlefield.
Yeah, I guess so.
He seems to think that waving a sword around in battle makes him superior. What an outmoded concept!
If anyone deserves credit, it's you, Dr. Qada. You treat not only your wounded allies, but the wounded shield bearers who fought against you. I have to admire you for that.
Oh. Do you really think so? Yes, you are quite right.
Is that by order of the Swordmaster?
Of course not. You would never approve of such actions. I have used my own judgment in this case.
Really? But what if word gets out? You'd get in trouble, Dr. Qada.
You do not worry about me. I merely seek to treat as many of the wounded as I can.
Did you hear that?
Yes, not quite how it went last time.
Do you think he actually has a heart? We heard what you had to say for yourself.
What? Who goes there?
My name is Adia Lee.
Adia Lee? You can't mean you're the Grand Marshal's daughter?
That aside, is it true that you've been treating wounded shield bearers, though you're an officer of the Black Blades? Why? Can it be that you truly have a heart? Do you seek to aid the masses? If so, then help us end this war.
Oh, that is rich! The very idea makes me laugh!
What?
You are somewhat misguided. Can you not understand that I need as many live bodies as possible for my experiments?
Live bodies? Experiments?
Exactly! I am Dr. Qada, salve maker. From weapons of mass murder to tonics of resurrection. There is no salve I cannot make, but when it comes to testing my concoctions, there are many obstacles. I cannot simply use wounded allies as specimens, can I? It is far cheaper and more efficient to use captured enemies. Do you not agree?
I should have known you were the monster I always took you for. I've been thoroughly duped.
Where is the master sample of your deadly toxin?
Oh, that. I'm afraid the Swordmaster has confiscated it. Not to worry, though. I still remember the recipe right down to the tiniest detail. I can craft more when needed and give those shield bearers another dose of my medicine.
We must put an end to him now!
Of course!
No! It cannot end here! I have left so many experiments undone! My toxins could kill you in seconds. Vestal! That was close. I made the right call drinking that concoction to fake my death. It seems the Vestal was convinced of my demise. The world is indeed full of fools. Now, it is time I left this wretched place.
So you flee again, do you?
But of course! I do what I must to survive, by any means necessary. As long as I survive, I am confident my fortunes will be reversed. After all, who but I can create weapons with the power to kill tens of thousands in one fell blow? And once I am ready, I will obliterate you all! The sword bearers and shield bearers, the Vestal, and even the Black Blades! And then the world shall be mine.
Not the world of the living.
Ah, I've been expecting you.
Oh, Commander Goodman. Good to see you made it home.
I came as soon as I could when I heard the Wind Vestal was holding a banquet in my honor.
A banquet?
My wife is also most pleased. You can see she's all in a bustle getting things...
Commander Goodman, please call your wife in here at once.
What? But why?
Just do it, please. Eleanor!
We were too late!
No, there may still be time. Just play along, everyone, okay?
What is wrong?
Something terrible has happened! It's Nastasia! She's dead!
Nastasia is dead. She was not breathing and had no pulse.
We believe a blow to the back of her head with a blunt object is what killed her. But we haven't found a weapon.
We've placed her body in bed for now.
I'm more concerned at the fact that the front door
won't open, right? This is all feeling very familiar.
What do we do?
We cannot let anyone get killed needlessly. Let us head to the bedroom.
Commander Goodman, I must ask you and the others to stay here.
All right, but what is going on?
What? Commander Goodman and Officer Neuer were killed?
Who could have done it?
It could be the covert unit of the Black Blades. Perhaps one of them disguised themselves as the servant. Yeah.
How the heck?
As we thought!
So you have discovered my rooms. I never expected you to notice I was merely posing as a corpse. How clever of you.
Ha! Just as I suspected!
It is our second time around.
I have yet to slay my mark. Trust the wind vessel and her troop to show up at the worst possible time. Well, it seems I have no choice, but...
Yeah, we know. You can skip the speech, Konoe Kikyo.
Here she comes!
Any last words before you meet your maker?
So, the ninja chooses to remain silent upon her death?
You think? It looks like she has something to say. Look, she's changed her disguise again.
I used the turmoil as the war drew to a close to finally round up the shield-bearer commander and his 2 top officers, but all of my effort has been for naught. All was going to plan until I used the wind vessel to lure my victims, and you all come sauntering in out of nowhere and ruin everything. That is the last time I trust alternates for information. I pitted Officers Steiner and Neuer against each other. For all that time. Yet you got me in the end. Wind Vestal.
She got that off her chest quick.
Wind Vestal, what on earth is going on?
Yes, indeed. Without an explanation, we are all in the dark.
Well, to put it plainly, a ninja of the Black Blades had disguised herself as the servant Nastasia and plotted to kill you all.
She used the Wind Vestal's name to get you here. We were able to stop her in time, though.
Astounding! Then those invitations.
Completely fabricated.
How could this happen? The shield bearers almost suffered a tremendous loss.
How did you see through the enemy's ruse, Wind Vestal?
She saw a vision.
Ah.
Wait, Medea!
Let it go. It's not too far from the truth, after all. Oh, one more thing, Eleanor.
Yes?
You would do well to check the cellar. You may find Nastasia tied up down there.
I will.
I guess that's case closed, then.
Thank you so much, Lady Vestal. You have done us a great service.
Yes. Well... This crystal has also reverted.
Should we perform the Rite of Awakening?
I think so.
Wait, something lurks nearby.
That's Chaugmar! The Mark of Doom! Another creature back from destruction!
Here they come!
crystal before we are beset by more beasts!
Of course.
I'm ready, Eri. I'm sure you have the hang of it, but if there's anything you'd like to go over again, just ask. Time to get started, Agnes. Are you ready?
Yes. Let us begin.
Not yet! Just a little longer! More! Keep going! Still not enough! You can do this! Stop! That's it! You did it! You awakened the crystal! Well done, Agnes!
Have you checked your brooch, Eri?
Yes, the fire crest is lit.
Phew. Good.
Are you okay, Agnes?
Yes, I am used to it now. I need a short rest, but then we should head to the next temple.
Okay.